This part of India suffers from the worst of Indian summer heat. Lying between Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh, it's called Bundelkhand. This is where Jhansi is. By the 1800s, the British had become much stronger in India. They were no longer the bedazzled, intimidated foreigner wanting permission to trade. Now, they were its superior white rulers in a land full of heathens. Mughal power had been reduced from the days of Akbar and Shah Jahan, and now the Mughal king Bahadur Shah Zafar was just the king of Delhi, living on British pension. Because the Mughal empire was now so weak and negligible, local chieftains rose up around Delhi and made their own deals with the British. The British took their land and trading revenues and gave them military protection in return. This alliance with India's elite, plus military power, plus the English crown's blessings, made them extremely powerful. Lord Dalhousie, the viceroy, came up with the doctrine of lapse, according to which any Indian ruling family that died without a legitimate male heir would now come under direct British rule. He hated Indians. With this doctrine of lapse, he could remove the elite and directly control the land, all its revenues and resources and military power. And through this doctrine of lapse, Punjab, Sikkim, Lower Burma, Awadh and Udaipur had already come under British and added £4 million extra to their annual revenues. In 1817, Jhansi had also signed a treaty with the British in return for British military protection. And in 1853, Jhansi's ruler, Gangadhar Rao, died. Left behind was his wife, the 25-year-old Brahmin girl Manikarnika, who had taken the name Lakshmibai upon her marriage. Gangadhar and Lakshmibai had no children, so the doctrine of lapse would now apply to Jhansi as well. That's why before dying, Gangadhar adopted a 5-year-old boy, Damodar Rao, as his heir. Lakshmibai tried hard to convince the British to not apply the doctrine of lapse and promised that they would remain loyal as always to the British government. When Major Malcolm, a British officer, wrote to Lord Dalhousie with the news of Gangadhar's death, he was on Lakshmibai's side. He said in his letter that the Rani was a woman highly respected and esteemed and fully capable of assuming the reins of government in Jhansi. But Lord Dalhousie didn't care. He was glad that Jhansi's revenues would now come to the British. Lakshmibai continued to try hard. She even hired an Australian lawyer, John Lang, who had already won a case against the British. With his help, she appealed to the British to let her remain the Queen of Jhansi. To impress John Lang that she was a good queen and that he should take up her case, she met him in the true royal style. Her chief minister went in a horse-drawn carriage to bring John Lang for his meeting with Lakshmibai. In the same carriage was a butler with ice buckets full of water, beer and wine. A servant stood outside the carriage all the while, fanning them. The British completely ignored her appeal yet again, and in May 1854, Jhansi lapsed into British authority. Lakshmibai too was now on British pension. At this time, British officers who met her describe her as civil, intelligent, clever, polite, quite the lady. But then came 1857, and with it came the 1857 Uprising. Lakshmibai found herself vulnerable because she didn't have an army, and Jhansi was located at the junction of 4 important roads: Kanpur, Delhi, Agra and Lucknow. The rebels threatened her that they would bring her relative Sadashiv Rao on Jhansi's throne until she offered them money, which she finally did. The day the rebels left Jhansi, Lakshmibai requested British help in securing Jhansi against any future attacks by the rebels. She was on the British side. Major William Erskine, who was the commissioner of the area at the time, authorized Lakshmibai's rule since the British were busy fighting the rebels. Even Sir Robert Hamilton, a senior officer of the British East India Company, later wrote that there was no evidence that the Rani had colluded with the rebels against the British. For the first time, Lakshmibai got the chance to rule Jhansi herself. And according to all the records, she did a great job of it. Meanwhile, the British had defeated the rebels and unthinkable carnage unfolded. They killed every rebel and even innocent Indians. Killing Indians turned into a sport for the British. Charles Dickens went so far as to declare his intention to exterminate the race from the face of the earth. This also affected the British attitude towards Lakshmibai. In January 1858, William Erskine assured Robert Hamilton that Lakshmibai should be hanged when caught. These are the same men who favored and respected her some time ago. Coincidentally, some rebels started entering Jhansi to run from the British. So Hugh Rose and his army were all headed to Jhansi now. Laxmibai realized that British were not her friend anymore, and she prepared for war. That woman raised her army from scratch. Because remember, she didn't have any before. She started carrying a sword and 2 pistols in her belt at all times. One account of a Brahmin priest who was in Jhansi at the time, who coincidentally was called Nathu Godse, later described she looked like the avatar of a warrior goddess. She fortified Jhansi, prepared the cannons. She even thought ahead. Knowing that Indian summer was approaching, she removed every tree from around her fort so that British wouldn't get one moment of respite when they lay siege. But like so many other times in Indian history, it was Indians against each other that helped bring their own defeat. When the British laid siege to Jhansi in the terrible heat, they were helped by Scindia from Gwalior and the Queen of Orcha. Later British records tell us that Laxmibai and her forces fought shot for a long time. But ultimately the British breached Jhansi's walls, entered Jhansi and massacred people. The night of 3rd April 1858, Laxmibai escaped Jhansi, right from under the noses of the British, on horseback with her soldiers. For the next few weeks she continued fighting while living in the scorching countryside. Laxmibai reached Gwalior, where Scindia, who earlier had helped the British against Laxmibai, escaped his fort fearing her. But all his troops abandoned him and joined Laxmibai and the rebels. In June 1858, her army met Hugh Rose's men near Gwalior. It was not a long battle. Multiple eyewitness records of this battle tell of the moment when one warrior fought the British army until he was shot in the back but continued fighting relentlessly, and then a sword was driven right through him, killing him. These records are describing Laxmibai. They didn't realize in that moment that it was a woman, Laxmibai. With Laxmibai's death, her army was defeated. Hugh Rose himself later wrote that with her death, the rebels lost their bravest and best military leader. For just a 26-year-old woman to take on British army the way Laxmibai did was truly exceptional for any culture of the time, not just India, but also for the British. Her story became a war cry that fueled India's subsequent fight for independence from British rule.